Welcome to Pivot to Progress, where we hear real stories of real pivots made here in the UAE. Now, we've heard of IQ and EQ, but how about CQ? That's cultural intelligence. And today we're joined by Emma Jordaan, the CEO of Infinite Consulting, to talk about her pivot strategy and how CQ helped shape her business. Emma, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have.
Wonderful. Infinite Consulting, full concierge system that you've created where you help businesses bring employees over to the UAE. You've got the workshops as well. Can you tell us a bit more about it? Like, what was the gap that you saw and why you came up with this business?
What I observed is that Dubai specifically is so multicultural. Most of us in the workplace will be working with people from all different cultures and all different places from around the world. The population here is made up of, 90, or maybe a bit more these days, percent expats. And the gap that I saw is that nobody ever teaches anybody how to work effectively with people from different cultures. There's lots of different soft skills that we're teaching people, leaders, on how to lead, but no one's talking about how can you then lead when you're leading a team that come from different cultures to your own. And so that was the gap that I saw in the market, and that's why we offer the services that we offer. So the range is, as you say, from helping organizations when they're bringing individuals into the UAE, and we want to support them with that transition. Some of those professionals may never have worked internationally before, or if they have, maybe not in this region. So helping them to navigate those cultural nuances that they're not familiar with is key in order to actually make them feel settled and make them want to stay within that role. Because companies spend huge amounts of money, sometimes if it's a really senior placement, in bringing somebody into the UAE for, to fulfill a role. So we need to make sure that transition is successful. Secondly, we help with cultural workshops. So when we've got teams of people working together, like multicultural teams, it doesn't always work well. There's obviously lots of friction and challenges that people face because we do tackle our work in very differing ways depending on our cultural values. And so we use those workshops to educate people on identifying some of those cultural differences in those behaviours so that they can then think about how they want to adapt and flex their own approach in the workplace so that they can work more effectively with their colleagues.
And what are some of the challenges that you see when people decide to come to you and sort of like the needs that they have?
One of the top challenges I see is, for example, leaders that come in from Western cultures who are not familiar with this more kind of indirect communicative style or authority orientated power dynamics. And so they, you hear them utter words like nobody has any initiative, where's the common sense gone, or things like why did my team say yes when they mean no? And I basically help them interpret some of those responses that they're seeing from their team.
You're in the construction industry for about 20 years before you made your pivot. Take us back to that time. Like, what made you decide to have that pivot?
I was in the construction industry for about 20 years, but that was in a learning and development capacity. So I've been a training professional for that duration. And the pivot came because the role that I was doing with the company was made redundant here in the UAE, and there was an intention to move the role into Saudi. The option was for me to then move into that role, but my intention was to remain here in the UAE. So I took the decision to accept redundancy, and that then created a kind of gap, if you like, in terms of what next, what do I do? And initially I'd anticipated that I would go back into the corporate space, perhaps with another construction organisation, or perhaps in a learning and development capacity, but within another industry sector. The more I thought about it, I'd always wanted to set up my own learning and development consultancy. And for me, this just felt like that amazing opportunity to do that. A scary one at that.
I can imagine after around about 20 years of being in the former place.
Yeah, and the security of the salary that comes with being in a corporate space. You're not going to have these opportunities come up often in your life where you can make these pivotal decisions. And I think, to be honest, if I hadn't been in that situation, I probably wouldn't have started the consultancy. I would have just carried on in the construction industry, in that like L&D role. But this was that opportunity to grab with both hands and see where it took me.
And what were some of the conversations you had also with yourself, but maybe with your partner about, okay, I want to make this pivot. Maybe there's a bit of fear as well, because like you said, you had that comfort of having known that you're going to have that regular stability of having that salary at the end of the month. So it'd be really interesting to hear about how you processed all of that.
But dependency on the salary that I had meant that we had to make some specific decisions as a family about, where we were going to live within Dubai. So we actually downsized the rental property that we were staying in just to make space for not having so much financial burden on us to pay the rent, basically, because we knew that this was the long game. Starting a business, you don't necessarily immediately have clients knocking on your door. So we needed to make some good decisions about how could we reduce our monthly outgoings. We had to have some serious conversations about what does that look like, what things can we do without, what things in our life were, perhaps luxuries or, nice to haves, but not essentials, so that we can make the right decisions around finances. And you asked, what were my initial emotions? There was oftentimes, I still now, several years in, go, am I doing the right thing? Because it is scary. But then these days, I quickly put myself back into touch and say, yes, of course it is. It is definitely the right thing to do. But in the early days, it's really daunting, not having that regular salary. And also, believing in yourself, just having the self-belief that you actually can do this and you have the capabilities to do this. So those were some of the emotions that we went through. But I have a really encouraging and supporting husband who is there, behind me 100%, supporting me and cheering me on and championing me. And I definitely wouldn't have been able to do this without him. But in those moments of doubt, that would be one of the things that I would advise, that you need those people behind you who are supporting you. And when you're listening to that voice in your head that says, can you do this? That those people are encouraging you and saying, yes, you can.
Absolutely. I've got my own community of cheerleaders as well. Sometimes it's a WhatsApp group that you have to go into and be like, okay, I need some support. I need some encouragement. And, they're always there. So I wholeheartedly agree with you on that one as well. Pivoting to setting up your consultancy here in the UAE, what were some of the challenges that you had? And what are some of the steps that everybody needs to take to set up a business here?
First thing you need to consider is, what expendable cash do you actually have to set this business up? If you're somebody that, regularly sets up business, has lots of cash flow, then you may pay somebody to help you set up the business yourself. You may pay one of these consultancies to set up your trade license for you, and that's great. But if, like me, you're somebody that didn't necessarily have, lots of expendable cash to throw at this idea, and because I was at that point out of work, I had lots of time on my hands to be able to, invest in actually doing this myself. Then I think there's a lot of ways that you can set up a business more cheaply if you have the time and lack of finances to actually then do that yourself. So my advice would be, do your research, go directly to some of the free zones in the region, not just in Dubai, but in some of the other Emirate states within the UAE, to see how you can get the most cost-effective and most suitable trade license that works for your business. Not all free zones offer all the different business activities that might work for your specific business. So you need to go and do research and see, which ones are available to you, and look at the different prices and why is one cheaper than another. There's lots of misinformation out there, I think, about trade licenses. And I think some of that's because, if we make a process seem more complex than it is, then we're likely to pay somebody else to do it for us. But when I actually ended up sorting out my own trade license, I thought, oh gosh, this wasn't actually as hard as I thought it was going to be. And actually, it was quite simple.
Setting up a business here comes with its own unique challenges because there are visas that we have to consider. Like you said, you need to have that pool of money, you need to have that cash flow as well coming in and things like that. What did you, I mean, obviously things have changed from when you first set up to now, but how do you go around dealing with things such as visas? How do you deal with knowing which free zone to use, for example?
So for me, the choice in regards to which free zone to use was based on the free zone itself offering the particular business activities that I needed, but two, just purely the cost. Because I had to bootstrap this business myself, I had to look at how can I do this as cheaply as possible without breaking the bank. And so the choice I made was to go with a particular free zone that was actually considerably cheaper by about 5,000 or 6,000 dirhams than one of the others that I'd been looking into. And so for me, then that was a no-brainer just to choose that particular one.
And for the visas?
Because of the work that I do around culture and how that enhances, the way that people can work effectively in the region and the contribution that that has to the country, I am fortunate to have a golden visa with the Culture and Arts Authority. But interestingly, I was investigating, what would be the most cheapest way to get a visa. The free zone that I have my trade license with offered visas, and when I priced it up, because I was also sponsoring my family as well, that felt quite costly, and I did some inquiries, and then the business associate of mine said, have you explored this as an option? And so I applied to the Cultural and Arts Authority, and my application was successful. So we are now on a golden visa with them, which is fantastic. Fantastic privilege to have, but also makes it really cost effective as well, because the application then for that visa is once in every 10 years rather than once in every 2 years, and so that worked out really financially beneficial for us.
And for those who might not be in that position to have a golden visa, what would you advise for them to do?
The best thing to do is, when you're speaking to a free zone to determine whether they are an appropriate free zone to take for your trade license, also be talking to them about the fact that you not only want a trade license, but you want a particular allocation of visas. Some of them will offer free visa allocation as part of the trade license, and then others will, apply a charge to that, and the charge may be, will obviously be different depending on how many visas you want. So do make sure that's part of your initial research before you take your trade license out.
And you offer many different services in your consultancy. Was that something that you deliberately did from the beginning, or did you just add them on as you went along?
Well, that in fact was a pivot in itself, because when I initially started the business, my intention was to offer a broad array of different soft skill development and leadership development packages to corporates. And then one of the pieces of advice that I received from somebody at the outset was, how are you going to differentiate yourself from your competitors? It's advisable to niche into a particular thing and just be really specific about what you want to offer and who is your audience, who are the decision makers, so that when you're, making yourself visible on LinkedIn or at networking events where you're talking to people about what your business offers, it's not just, woolly and too broad. You're able to very clearly, explicitly explain what it is that you offer and who is it suitable for. And so, as I say, that's when I really thought about, well, what is the gap in the market when it comes to training and coaching, and figured that this cultural intelligence would be a skill that leaders need in this region. And some of that was because of the faux pas that I recall that I made when I first came to this region. And we can talk about some of those later if you want.
I'm itching to know. You know what my next question will be. But yeah, continue.
On top of the various different learning and development qualifications that I already have in the bag, I then went and got myself certified as a CQ fellow, so that I could then specialise in cultural intelligence.
Now, Emma? We want to know what some of those faux pas were.
I think, when you get to a certain level within your career, you have this self-assured element to yourself where you recognize that you're technically competent at what you do. And that's, because I started my career in the UK, and then that career brought me here working within the corporate space. So you come into the region feeling self-assured that you definitely know what you're doing because you've been brought here to do that job. And I came here with my own cultural lens, my own understanding of how to lead people, and that was based on the leadership that I'd seen modelled in the UK, the leadership models that I'd been even training people on how to interpret and understand within the UK workspace. And then I quite quickly realised that not all of that translates well when you're working cross-culturally. People talk about emotional intelligence, to your point at the beginning of the episode, but often emotional intelligence is taught in and amongst our own cultural understanding. Emotions are understood through our own cultural lens, and actually different cultures display emotions in quite different ways. Some cultures don't outwardly display emotions. And so, when you think about that then in the context of the workplace, you quite quickly can misunderstand others in the team. I think I was leading people thinking that, if my team have anything that they feel that they can add value to the conversation or the decision making that we're making, that they would feel the freedom to speak up and share those thoughts and ideas with me. And I remember one specific example where I'd made the decision on a particular thing, and then it later transpired that we should have made another decision. And when I spoke to the team about it, it was clear that they knew that my decision wasn't necessarily the right one to make. But when I asked them why they'd not challenged my decision making, the answer was really simple, and that was, you're the boss. And so I realised in that moment that, people don't all feel the freedom to speak up and share their thoughts and ideas. Back to my point earlier about common sense and initiative, it's not that they don't have it or that they lack it. It's actually, do we feel free to challenge the boss when they are telling us what we should or shouldn't be doing? And in a lot of cultures that are operating here within this region, they don't feel that freedom. And so that's where we then hear those phrases of, well, people lack common sense or initiative.
So what it comes down to is misunderstandings, miscommunication as well, a lot of it.
Yeah, and unfortunately what then happens is people are judged on that as a performance issue, that people will probably be in this on performance improvement plans in this region because they haven't showed enough initiative in a situation, or they haven't spoken up enough in a meeting, which might be perceived as a negative attitude in the workplace, for example, or lack of contribution. They don't get involved in projects enough. And some of those will be down to cultural nuances.
Looking at your work as a solo entrepreneur, how do you deal with scaling your business? Because you are now offering an array of different services.
As a solopreneur, you've always got this tension between, when's the right time to take on more staff. You get to a point where you're maybe concerned with, do I have the capacity to do all of the things that you're trying to do? You're wearing many hats, as we all know. And that might look like, for me specifically, it looks like business development, going to networking events, being seen. It means keeping my social media up to date on LinkedIn and Instagram. It means being the one that actually delivers the product or service that we've talked about. And it means being the liaison with the client. It means being the accountant, sending out the invoices, and the list could go on. So there is that tension. When is the right time to take other staff on? I think as a solopreneur, the next step that you can do, especially in this region, because there are so many freelancers, is freelance out some of the work rather than actually bringing employees on into the business. So that you've got other resources that you can pull upon without having that commitment of, visas or paying people's permanent salaries. And so that would be my advice. That would be the next step, if you're seeing that you're running out of capacity to meet the demands of your business, think about how you can outsource some of the work to other freelancers and actually help other small to medium-sized businesses and other solopreneurs like yourself who are, trying to grow their business.
Where at the moment in your business are you trying to grow, and where do you need those freelancers?
The next steps for me is to outsource social media. I'm just in the throes of doing that as we speak. I've already outsourced my accountancy work to a freelancer in the region. I suppose one of the areas where I'm still working out is whether I'd want to outsource the business development to somebody else at this stage. When you become the face of your brand and you go out to networking events and people, see you, they know you. I go to networking events now and people have either met me before or they've seen me on LinkedIn and they'll say, oh, I think I know you. No, I don't. Actually, I've just seen you on LinkedIn. And so, my brand and my profile is going into those networking events before me. And the idea of then handing that over to somebody else and saying, right, now I want you to represent me and my brand feels quite frightening. And I'm concerned about whether I would lose some of that traction with the clients. But that's something that eventually I'm going to have to do. So, I'm at that stage now thinking about what would that look like and how could I do that?
Sounds like a good problem
It's
to have, actually.
definitely a good problem to have, absolutely, yeah.
What are some of the signs that people should notice and acknowledge when they are probably outgrowing their role?
I think when you start to notice that the quality of your work is potentially diminishing, then you need to start to recognize that you can't be in all places at all times, and you need to start to outsource some of that work, whether that's to full-time salaried employees in-house within your business or out to freelancers. But as I said, I think the initial phase would be outsourced to freelancers so you don't have that financial commitment or burden. And, we would maybe start using other ways to... some people at the moment are using AI avatars to represent themselves in virtual meetings. It's not something that I've started to do
We're
yet.
not going to see an AI Emma giving workshops about.
No, it's not something that I've adopted, but you don't know what the future holds. It might be something that in future we all have. But right now, it's not something that I've adopted. But I do think, when you start to see your quality potentially ready to diminish, you need to think about how can you utilize resources? What are your priorities? Where do you need to still remain in control of the particular elements of work? And where can you farm some of that work out? So things like your accountancy, your social media, perhaps. But I still definitely think you need to be keen on playing a role or a part in what does your voice sound like on social media. People have had people ghostwriting for them for a number of years. People even write books on behalf of other people. So that concept's not new, but I think it's just important that if you are going to use a freelancer or you're going to use AI to build your posts, then you just need to make sure it's still your voice that people are hearing. There's nothing worse than somebody getting an impression of you on, for example, LinkedIn, and then when they meet you in person or they watch an episode of your podcast, they think you're actually not the same person and that they've been misled.
Absolutely. Networking is something I also want to bring up and discuss with you, because a lot of people that I've talked with have said how important networking is. What are some of the tips that you would provide on how to network better? Because I think we all understand about working hard. We all understand, we also have to break down what that means as well. Break down what successful networking looks like to you.
In Dubai, I think face-to-face presence is vital. I always use that phrase, it's not what you know, it's who you know in this region. If somebody's going to hand over, amounts of money to you to hire you for your products or services, most of that's done because they've met you before, they trust you, and they know that you're going to deliver for them. Not because they saw your profile on LinkedIn and now they're going to work with you. So you are going to be leaps and bounds ahead of your competitors if you are out there and you're being seen in the right circles, whether that's networking events within your industry sector or networking events within there's lots of business council out there where you can become a member of your country's business council. So there's copious different ways that you can potentially network. And for me, when I first started networking, I'm happy to admit that I didn't understand how to do it well. And that's because I would go to a networking event thinking that I needed to get in front of the decision maker that was going to utilize my products or services. And the likelihood of that happening is slim. And so I'd come away from networking events having spoken to a handful of people, maybe none of them a decision maker, and think, gosh, that was a waste of time and money. I'm not sure kind of why I'm bothering. But moving to now, my view of networking is entirely different. When I go to networking, I go to build friendships with people that are in the business space. Because if I'm going to win somebody's trust, it's because they like me. And so my job then, actually, as a business owner, is just to get as many people to like me as possible. Now, obviously, I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea, and that's fine. We never all are everybody's cup of tea. But my responsibility when I'm networking is to find my tribe. Who is it that I connect well with, who likes me, who maybe isn't likely to personally use my products or services because they don't have a need for them, but if they then hear of somebody else within their own network of friends or business associates who does need those products or services, I'm the person that's on the tip of their tongue, and they're saying, hey, you definitely need to speak to Emma because she would be able to help you with those challenges you're facing. And so I heard somebody once say that everybody has around 250 connections. And so as soon as you start to build your own tribe, you're immediately, effectively getting in front of their 250 people without actually physically getting in front of their 250 people, because those individuals are doing the referrals for you. But we all know we're only going to refer the people that we like and that we trust. Yeah, so my mantra, if you like, now when I go to networking events isn't how can I get in front of the decision maker? If I do, fantastic. But it's how can I, get to know others? And my foremost thought is, and how can I help them with their business? So, when I refer somebody else, we immediately have that kind of I owe you one mentality. Mm-hmm. So my job is how, if I met you at a networking event, I would be interested to find out what you do, but also how can I help you? Who is your decision maker? Who are you trying to get in front of? Who can I connect you with? And then follow through with those connections, not just talk the talk, but actually walk the walk and make those introductions. In the hope that, between us, we could build a friendship, and then when the opportunity arises, you'll also, want to do the same and repay that favour.
Looking at your business as well, can you tell us a bit more about the percentages that you dedicate to marketing, for example? There's obviously the admin and things like that, because I think it helps someone to get a full picture of what they're going into if they set up a consultancy.
At the beginning, you need to spend the large majority of your time business development, going to networking events, because that's how you're going to get known in the region. So that would be, the forefront of your time. Looking at what networking events exist, and how many you can go to in a week.
Are there any networking events that you recommend as it's a must-go event for you?
For me personally, because my decision makers are typically people within the HR space, I tend to go along to a number of the different HR networking events that exist in the region, and there are a few. But other people will obviously be in different industry sectors. So do your research, look at what networking events are happening in your sector. Think about the World Trade Center, for example, what conference exhibition events are happening within your industry sector. Make sure you get yourself to those events. A lot of those events you can get into for free if you just want to go into the expo space rather than into the conference part of the event. So, even if you're trying to do this on a very slim budget, you can still get yourself to those events. Make sure you've got business cards ready. I definitely think that you need to have something in people's hands so that they remember you. I'm all for sustainability and thinking about but I think it's important that when people get back home or to their office, that they've got something tangible that they can remember you by, because they may remember everything you said, but if they've spoken to 20 people that day, they're not necessarily going to remember your name. And if you didn't give them a business card, they may have worked for you, but have no means of getting back in contact with you. So yeah, I think business development is where I would spend most of my time at the beginning. But then making sure that you're visible on LinkedIn as well, because if you're going to go to these events, people want to then see whether you are who you said you were in that moment. So when they have spoken to you at the networking event, they're likely to go straight away when they get home to check out your profile on LinkedIn. And if it doesn't say anything about you, or doesn't live up to their expectations of what they met in person, it can really have a detrimental effect on how they perceive you then going forward. So make sure that your LinkedIn is up to date. And I think the mistake that a lot of people make is every morning think, gosh, right, I've got to write a post now. What am I going to say? And every day are, in that panic of, I haven't posted yet today. What am I going to say?
Yeah.
So I actually dedicate one day, if not two sometimes, not necessarily back to back, but 1 or 2 days within the month where I schedule all of my LinkedIn posts so that I'm like a month ahead of today's date. So that if I am at a networking event, or if I am delivering training, or if I'm doing something with my family for the day, I don't have to panic that I've got to post something on LinkedIn. And I think also that helps you to kind of be in the zone. If you're doing a whole day of social media, your mindset's right. There's no other distractions. And you can then really focus on what is the message this month that I'm trying to convey? What's the priority that I want to get out there to my audience? And somebody else I saw online once said that your LinkedIn posting can be, you can think of it a bit like you think of your weekly food menu. So you might say like, Monday's chicken, Tuesday's fish, Wednesday's beef, or whatever it might be as an example. And they said, if you think about your LinkedIn as Monday is the day where I post my own thoughts on the particular problem that we're facing in the industry right now on a particular subject. So Monday's your insights and reflections. Tuesday is the day where you've done your research and you've found something that's being said by a key influencer or somebody that's held with high esteem within your industry sector, where you can repost their post and add your own comments. And Wednesdays, and you basically then have this idea of Mondays when I do this, Tuesday is the day I say this, Wednesday is the day I say this. And so all of a sudden it means that when you're thinking about what I'm going to say, it's okay, I've got to create 4 posts this month with my own insights. I've got to find 4 insightful posts from key influential people within the industry sector that I'm going to repost and think about. And so it really then simplifies what am I going to say this month, so that you're not there frantically thinking about, how can you add value? But I mean, to that point though, you want to be thinking about how can you add value to your audience? Why are you a voice that people want to listen to? What are the problems or challenges that your audience are facing? And how can you perhaps help to kind of be thought-provoking or answer some of those problems through the posts that you're posting? You want people to be almost waiting for what's the next thing you're going to say, and even influencing. I remember when I first came to market with cultural intelligence, and people were saying, well, what's that? What is cultural intelligence? And people were thinking I was talking about organisational culture as opposed to individual people's cultural values and the way it shapes their behaviour. And through the work that I've done over the last few years of growing the business and just, hammering home that message, people are now understanding that terminology, cultural intelligence, without me having to introduce it. And that's through having helped to shape that conversation in the HR space, through the podcast, through the book, and through the multiple different things, the different channels. So sometimes you have to be a trailblazer in, championing the message that you want people to hear.
Absolutely. And with you explaining that content strategy, it takes away that feeling of being overwhelmed as well, I think, too, from it all, because it can be quite daunting when you think of all the things you have to do, in addition to actually running the business as well. So, you know, you're doing so many different things. You mentioned about the book, which is Dubai Decoded. You're a TEDx speaker as well. You run your own, or you co-host your own podcast, actually.
Yep.
HR and CQ. What's next? Will you be pivoting again?
I don't think it's necessarily so much a pivot, but it's just like, how can the business continue to expand? I want to see a situation where the business grows, where we've got multiple training facilitators working with us to facilitate the multiple different sessions that we're having within different corporate organizations. So, dare I say it, the next step is to have a training academy.
Wow.
To actually have our own premises, our own, space where we can bring our clients in, and we can facilitate our workshops within our own space. And whether that then expands into other training, soft skilled topics, broader than cultural intelligence. Well, we have to just watch this space, basically. But, I vision board and I think about the future. I'm, if I'm ever at a space where I'm thinking, what next? I just look at that vision board and say, okay, what do I need to do next to bring about that particular thing that I want to see in the future? And that those small steps bring you closer and closer. So something like, for example, a TEDx in the past always fell out of reach. And yet, here I am, having done a TEDx. The idea of writing a book was certainly never something on my radar. But again, the book's now out there. So I think back to that point earlier of, whether you have that self-belief, I think we definitely need to make sure we tune into, or make sure we recognize which voices we're tuning into, and recognize that there is a plan and a purpose for our future, and we can make those incremental steps to make that happen.
What's a mistake that you would lend to someone so that they don't make that mistake themselves?
To my earlier point about networking, it's not to see networking as a transactional thing, and it's actually to recognize it's relational. Business is relational. People want to work with people they like. Don't make the mistake that I made at the beginning of, worrying about getting in front of the decision maker and thinking that the event was a waste of time if I didn't get in front of the decision maker. I was also sometimes, concerned with whether people at the networking event were, in the right sort of circles for people that would hire my services. But, you might meet somebody and they're the husband of a very successful CFO or CHRO in an organization who are facing those challenges. And then all of a sudden that person is able to connect you to that professional and before you know it, won that client. So it's not to underestimate or undermine who is in front of you.
Okay, complete this sentence for me.
Okay.
Before I pivoted, I thought
that owning my own training consultancy was out of reach.
And now that you've pivoted, you believe
success is based on your own resilience, your own determination, your own drive and desire to make that happen.
And what are some of the tips you would give to somebody who's about to move over to the UAE? They're making their own pivot over to the UAE.
I think it's really important to recognize that the culture is different here. You will be working with people from multiple different countries. And so do your research, learn about some of the different cultural nuances so that you can equip yourself and make yourself ready to have those interactions with your colleagues and also avoid making faux pas.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing that's very important when someone's moving over here is to discuss salary negotiations. What advice would you give to somebody?
Make sure you've done your research. The numbers, when you convert it into your own currency from back home, may look appealing, but we need to remember that the cost of living here is, we're working in a different market. So work out, what does a weekly shop cost? You can go onto the websites of the supermarkets here and, put all of the things in the shopping cart and work out how much does that cost, and what percentage of my salary will that be, Is that something I can afford with the salary that they're offering me? And the second thing is to remember that certain things aren't free like they might be in your own country. So I come from the UK. Schooling is free in the UK, but here it's not. So either it needs to be part of your salary package that you get free children's placements, and that your organisation or the company that you're going to work for is going to cover those costs. Or, if you're a solopreneur and you've got to cover those costs yourself, bear in mind, what does that cost mean on a monthly basis to our income? And again, is that affordable?
What's the most underrated skill when pivoting?
I think we need to think about what are the transferable skills that we're taking from lessons learned within the corporate space that we can bring into our new role or our new business. One of the things that worked well for me is that in the previous role that I was involved in a lot of software rollouts, ERP deployments and things like that. And it meant that I had to learn a lot of new softwares, we'll figure out how to operate them, and then teach people through our training how to utilize those pieces of software. And then how I've then brought that into my own business is, I had to learn how to use Canva. I had to learn how to schedule posts on LinkedIn. I had to learn how to use video editing software. I've had to, there's so many different pieces of software that I now have to use. And I think that is for me a transferable skill. So I would say, have a think about what have you learned in the corporate space and how you can then use that knowledge and apply that into your business.
Thank you so much, Emma, for joining us today and sharing your story of how you pivoted and also learning more about cultural intelligence.
Thanks for having me.
That's Emma's blueprint on how she pivoted from the construction industry into setting up her own consultancy. Now, that was Emma's blueprint and how she did things. You can take that and adapt it for yourself as well. Please don't forget to like, share, leave a comment, and it'd be really great if you could also subscribe to this channel, as this is a new podcast. And don't forget, don't stay stuck, pivot.